I'm Austin with Austin Taylor Insurance, and this is Agent About Town. Today in a beautiful studio with David and Chris from Augusta Podcast, aka GetUpProductions. And guys, I appreciate you letting us borrow this. This is fabulous. And getting to see kind of behind the scenes of what we watch on social media is really kind of neat. I mean, there's people everywhere. There's lights everywhere. Really a really well done thing. So I appreciate you guys having us.
Yeah, shout out to the massive production team that nobody sees.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's people behind the literal curtain is where they all hide. So let me ask you this. How did you guys get here? And from the basic start of Augusta Podcast, what got you and what got you interested?
Yeah.
Well, it all started from our podcast, Drop the Disc.
Okay.
That's where it all started from. If are you familiar with Drop the Disc podcast?
Yeah.
It's all about Augusta. We're dropping that nasty word, disgusta, that we hear too often. And from that, we were doing everything. I mean, David was doing all the editing. And so we were starting to get inquiries about advice about starting podcasts.
So you didn't set out to do it.
It's kind of a funny story.
Well, what we did was really through experiencing them, we found the pain points associated with what we do, like what's hard, what doesn't work, what does work, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And we had a little bit of trouble initially with our show of actually naming the show. So at one point we had a sponsor and we were like, okay, well, we need to collect this money. So we need an LLC, which means we need a name.
Right.
So we said, okay, well, let's use Augusta Podcasts. And then if we ever start a company, we don't have to do another LLC.
Right.
So that was like the way back, like late 2019 version of like where the name came from. And then we said, well, if we ever move into a studio, that could be a name that we could use and we could let people come to the studio and then we could coach them and help them do shows.
Yeah, so necessity is the mother of invention, right?
That's right.
Right.
And you mentioned this studio, and Chris, I know y'all have another studio.
Right.
It's a
across
whole
the
different
street.
feel,
Yeah,
right?
Totally different vibe. We call it the lounge.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've seen that one. That one's more like, I've seen people play music in there.
Right.
You've had some really good, interviews and things in that one, but it's just a little bit different in this one, so you can fit whichever vibe somebody's looking for.
Absolutely.
That's what it is, really. Like if somebody's looking to do like an at-home creation type podcast, like go to the lounge, sit back and have a good time. But if you want to do it for business or something more professional,
right, and
you want to bring, say like the mayor or other CEOs in, like you don't necessarily have to bring those types of people to the lounge. Maybe you could bring them to the professional space.
Yeah, a little professional setting to kind of make them kind of fit what they're going to talk about.
That's right.
But the pain points and all you're talking about, I mean, is that technology-based pain points? Was it you guys, learning how to interact with a guest and ask probing questions? What was that?
The biggest pain points, and the guest thing Chris can talk a little more about. Right. Mine is the post is time. The biggest pain points are time. You run into, okay, so let's say it's one person, because we're lucky enough to have two people, but most shows have one host. You have one person doing the social media, doing the promotion outside of social media, cutting the clips, publishing the episode, editing the episode, recording the episode, preparing for it, all this stuff. And you really kind of feel like you're by yourself on an island, basically running another business. Whatever you do, it's like another almost part-time, 20 hours a week situation. And
not to mention booking guests and trying to keep those things in line and matching schedules. I know we've tried to get together for a long time now, and our schedules kind of finally lined up. So I mean, that's another human element in addition to the time and technology pieces.
Absolutely. And the actual conversation, the interview process, however your show, whatever that content is, there's definitely a learning curve. You can Google all the strategy and whatnot to be a better interviewer, or how you present yourself in a podcast. But that was a learning curve for both David and I. And really it was, how much time can we save David in editing? And that is how we started pinpointing how to have a very concise, goal-driven show.
So, Dave and Chris, we talked about the studio when we first got on and how nice this is and professional and all that. But I mean, I know from experience being, a small business owner, we what you see now is not where things started. And
Right.
obviously, you guys, we mentioned a rebranding to GetUpProductions. And so that signals kind of a change in your business, but kind of tell me how did it get here and kind of along the way, a little timeline.
Well, we started in the lounge studio.
Okay.
So that was our first mark where we had the studio, 12th floor. We love it. It's the OG.
Great view.
Great view
Great
of
view.
downtown.
That's what it is.
That's what sold us on it. But it was the opportunity to start the business venture of Augusta Podcast.
So.
Yeah, and for us, like, we kind of see studios less as a necessity for people coming in. Like, we don't want to be a studio rental business. We kind of want to be more so, we want to be more so like cultural, in that we want people to see this kind of cool stuff happening and then think like, oh, well, if they can do this, I could do this in my home or business or something like that. But when we first, we were originally approached by Alison South Marketing, which is where, we're in that building today,
Right.
to help them build a studio.
Yeah.
So we're like, wow, this is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted.
Because at the time, we were building studios for people.
Right.
Studios in Columbia, other studios elsewhere. And so that the business model was in there.
Yeah, we didn't want to own anything. We wanted
Right.
to just manage studios. So Alison South said, hey, could you build us a studio? And we're like, hey, can we manage it? And long story short, we ended up partnering with them,
Right.
Which has been really cool for us. It's opened us up to a lot of resources.
Right.
I probably attribute a lot of our early growth to being able to produce really good content with their video team.
Sure.
Right.
And also being able to utilize the cool things that are going on here to get a little bit of a PR bounce. I mean, we've really been intentional, I think, about trying to be in front of people, whatever we're doing.
And it's also very good for us to be a part of a culture, a good work culture. And so being a part of that with Alison South, we've been able to honestly flourish.
So the rebrand and Augusta Podcast, kind of tell us about that.
So the first thing we had to do was hire an editor. And one really cool thing about the relationship we have with Alison South is that our editor gets to have this really cool work environment. And at the same time, he can enjoy work. He can see other people doing things. So it's like, it's a very creative space to bring someone into. So now that we had that, we can say, okay, now we can actually focus on working on the business instead of in the business.
Growing up a little bit is how I term it in my business when I'm talking to somebody that is, explaining kind of where we started and where we're at now. I say, I had to grow up personally, and kind of the environment had to grow up, and it seems like that's kind of translating the same way to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I was editing for 10 hours a day, and it was like, when are we supposed to be selling anything now? So we bring him in, and then we say, okay, well, now our whole original idea was to do remote production for other markets.
Okay.
And so now we have the staff, which means we have the capacity, we have the partnership, so that we have kind of the tools for outreach and marketing,
and we have the markets to jump into.
Yeah, and
Alison South is already a part of.
Right.
So GetUpProductions, one, allows us to work in these other markets, but two, it allows us to work in the other markets while also paying homage a little bit to Augusta.
Right.
Get Up being based on the James Brown album, even the colors of the brand come from the James Brown album.
Right.
So if you know, it's kind of one of those things.
So kind of shedding the geographical name Augusta,
Right.
but still, letting people know that that's where you're from.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that helps out with how our business model will look geographically. So we just opened up a studio in Aiken.
Okay.
At Urban and Rural. It's also known as the Roost.
Okay.
And I believe it's off Richland.
Yeah, it's off Richland, and it's just another studio under management. So for us, that's doing exactly what we want to be doing.
So that location will be called Aiken Podcast.
Okay.
This will continue to be called Augusta Podcast. Wherever else we go, we'll just continue building those locations.
It's almost like the online version of the businesses Get Up, and then the studio version is kind of the geographical tags.
Right.
I got you. So that's where you're at now.
That's where we're right now.
What's the future?
So one thing we're working on that we're really excited about, and we think it's going to be a bigger thing as technology progresses.
Right.
We got into live streaming in 2020.
Okay.
Because one, there's nothing else to do. So it's like, okay, let's get good at this.
You're at home or locked up in here.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time to work on something else.
Let's learn some skills. Yeah, come on. So we decided we wanted to get into live streaming. So we had a couple of forums. We actually brought local politicians and business leaders together to talk about some things that were going on.
Right.
You can find those in the Drop the Disc podcast.
Right.
But then we also had this idea, which is not an original idea, but the best ideas never are, where we have this really, really cool golf tournament in Augusta, and there's really not a lot of local coverage. There's not a lot of, like, you turn on the major news providers, the major coverage, and you're going to see a lot of golfers. You're going to see a lot of former winners, maybe some international business people, athletes, movie stars. What you're not going to see is, anything that's really unique to this area. Like you talk about the concerts that happen, Rock for Dough.
Right.
You talk about the XPR Augusta that's coming this year. You talk about what George, what do they do?
Major Rager.
They talk about Major Rager, all these things, and there's way more that nobody has any idea that happen, and people just come in and fly out and have no idea these things are happening.
They stick to Washington Road.
Right, so you go to Hooters, you see John Daly, you buy a $150 pair of pants, and then you go back to your house that you're renting in Westlake, which is 40 minutes away. So what we're trying to do is we do a live watch-along coverage of that. And it's kind of along with our brand. We hire people to host it, so we kind of run the back end of it. We run the hospitality of it. This year, we partnered with XPR Augusta, and we're really excited. It's the Bobby Jones Invitational Show, named, of course, after the highway. And we're really excited to kind of be able to provide this local, but also far-reaching, really content that nobody else seems to be interested in doing to promote the city.
And XPR's the folks that have taken over Lake Olmsted.
Right.
That's right.
C4 Live from Las Vegas has bought into Lake Olmsted.
Okay.
And C4, if y'all aren't familiar, y'all could go listen to the Drop the Disc episode with Greg Costello. But also, C4 is the company that follows the Super Bowl concert, or does the Super Bowl concerts.
Okay.
So they put up these huge structures, tear them down after the Super Bowl, and then move on to the next city. So that Lake Olmsted is the first infrastructure that they don't have to take down.
Okay.
They're just building up, and it's going to stay there. And it's going to be used 80 days out of the year?
Something like that. They have a management contract for 10 years that renews for 10 more, which is really exciting and details that nobody cares about.
Yeah.
But the long story of the short version is it's 20 years of really cool concerts. I mean, this year is Jimmy Buffett, Nelly, Blake Shelton, Tim McGraw, and Pitbull, which is like, you could tell me one of them was coming maybe, and I'd be like, okay, I'm interested.
Yeah.
But all 5 of them are coming, which is really cool. But all of that goes to say what our dream is to produce a technology company in Augusta, staff in Augusta, and build this culture of creatives and businesses actually working together in downtown, Evans, North Augusta, the CSRA as a whole.
I'm Austin with Austin Taylor Insurance, and this has been Agent About Town with David and Chris from Drop the Disc, Augusta Podcast, and GetUpProductions. Follow us on social media, all social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and to see where we get our next victims from. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Austin.
it.